Learn English through Stories G41 PDF. Adapted and modified by Kulwant Singh Sandhu. Contents: 1. The Boutique. 2. Grammar page. 1. The Boutique by Shashi, Tharoor. The elevator attendant swung open the door of the elevator and looked at Amma and me with an appraisingly critical eye. From his manner it was clear he wasn't very impressed. Amma, in her plain cotton sari with her slightly graying hair done up in a traditional way at the back, clutching the invitation card as if for security and looking very plain and rather proletarian. Me in my loose kurta that fell awkwardly from bony shoulders, in narrow trousers that went out of fashion 5 years back, sporting an unshaven under chin looking more unkempt than dashing. He elevated an eyebrow ever so slightly and moved infinitesimally to the left, as though making way for appearance's sake. I waved Amma into the elevator as she stepped in awkwardly, unsure of herself, and followed, trying to look confident and extroverted. The attendant didn't move. He waited for further passengers. There was no one in sight, while we fidgeted uneasily, then turned his face a fraction towards me. "Where to?" he asked. "The new boutique opening," Amma answered for me, trying to assert herself. "In the, she looked at the card, Plaza Lounge. "Which floor is that?" The attendant looked at her incredulously, then contemptuously. He nodded in sage understanding and made to shut the elevator door. In the distant entrance to the hotel foyer, a fat lady in a dress of some expensive material waddled through, and the attendant paused in his act for her to make her way to the elevator. He could have left us at the first floor and come back for her in that time, but he waited, and so did we. I suddenly felt like rushing out of the elevator, the hotel, the area. This wasn't our place. We didn't belong here. But I didn't. Poor Amma had been so desperately keen on coming to attend the new boutique opening, and despite my reluctance, I had agreed to escort her. Father had a minor desk job in the editorial department of the city's leading paper, and he often got these invitations. He always brought them home proudly, as if to show to Amma and me he wasn't as much of a failure as we knew he was, and they lay on the solitary bedroom table as cardboard symbols of his prestige. We rarely used them. But this was one time Amma was insistent. She had always been anxious to see how the mod sophisticates she had heard about live. Now here was an opportunity to see them in their natural habitat. She couldn't throw away this chance of a lifetime, and she couldn't go alone. So she dragged me along. The fat lady reached the elevator, and the attendant stepped aside in deference to let her in. She was about Amma's age, I guessed. She wore a wig, an excess of makeup, a lot of real-looking jewelry, and an air of haughty superiority. A reek of some expensive perfume preceded her by a good 10 yards. Amma stepped back uncomfortably into the darkest recesses of the elevator as she entered. The door shut, and the elevator proceeded smoothly upwards. I saw Amma try not to look at the fat lady, and I felt a wave of pity and compassion surge up in me. Instinctively, I put a hand on her arm. "Don't worry, Amma," I thought. "I'll protect you." Protect you? The words mocked me in my mind. From what? I hastily dropped my hand from her arm. The elevator stopped, the door opened, and the fat lady stepped out first. It was natural, unquestioned. It was her due. I let Amma follow and then stepped out too with a thank you to the attendant. He ignored me completely. Amma was overawed by the landing leading to the suite where the boutique was, the wall-to-wall carpeting, the air-conditioned atmosphere, the little groups of suited and booted people. Suddenly I too felt out of my class. I started wishing I had paid more attention to my appearance. I looked into one of the mirrored columns and hastily, furtively, smoothed back my hair. People were walking into the boutique now. There were not very many of them, perhaps 15, perhaps 20. We were late. The speeches and ribbon cutting, if there had been any, appeared to be over. People were standing around in twos and threes, sipping coffee served by a uniformed waiter and examining some of the objects for sale. Amma and I hesitantly went in. No one took any notice of us whatsoever. The waiter passed us, looking through us without pausing in his stride. I thought at first that the coffee had to be paid for, then saw him offering steaming hot cups of it to all the visitors. Anyone who chose to could take a cup of coffee. I felt a wave of anger rising up in me. We had been insulted. I halted him as he turned back with a half-empty tray by physically standing in his path. "Here too," I said. He glowered at me resentfully for a second, then proffered the tray to me. I took a cup and waved him on to Amma. Reluctantly, he complied. Amma refused him with a thank you and a smile. "Why did you do that, Amma?" I asked after the waiter had moved away. "I thought you liked coffee." She didn't reply. Instead, she looked around her and said, "Come, let's see what there is here." I followed her to the tastefully decorated section for men's garments. There were a few people looking at the clothes put up for sale. A young couple hovered around indecisively, and a smiling salesgirl came up to them and asked, "Can I help you?" They said, "No, thanks," and she went away. She saw us, equally uncertain, but ignored us all the same. Amma looked at the impressive array of shirts, ties, and jackets before her. One jacket, in black leather, especially attracted her. "I've always wanted you to have something like this, son," she said, "and God knows we haven't been able to afford to buy you anything, but looking at you in your plain clothes and seeing these boys here in such fine attire, I want you to have this. I know it will suit you, my son. You are a handsome boy, and this will look good on you." She fingered the sleeve. There was no price tag attached. Poor Amma was captivated by it. I wanted to say, "No, Amma, I don't want it. I don't need it at all. I am quite content with the clothes I have." But I could imagine myself in that leather jacket, the envy of the boys and the wonder of the girls in the neighborhood, and no words came out of my lips. I watched her, half in hope and half in anticipation. Amma caressed the jacket and took it off its hanger. "Come closer, my son," she said, placing it against my body so she could see me with it. "It looks wonderful. I wonder how much it will cost." "Here, you can't touch the articles," the salesgirl said, coming up behind Amma suddenly. "Can't you see the sign?" She pointed to a "Please Don't Touch" card among the clothes. "Don't you know English?" Amma flushed a deep red. "I'm sorry," she mumbled in confusion, hastily trying to put it back. I didn't see. How much does it cost?" The salesgirl took the jacket from her hands and looked at her pityingly. 700 rupees, she said. Amma was completely thrown off her guard by the entirely unexpected figure. "What, pardon me, 700 rupees?" she asked in confused embarrassment. "That's right, ma'am," the girl said, placing the jacket back in its place. "And please don't touch the clothes." "It's all right, Amma," I said. "I didn't want it anyway. What shall I do with a jacket like this?" Amma still looked miserable, so I added, "Anyway, it's far too big for me. I'd look like a scarecrow in a wrestler's leftovers if I wore this." She wasn't consoled. Just then, a famous radio disc jockey entered the boutique, and all eyes turned in his direction. Tall and ruggedly handsome, he wore a silk shirt and scarf and flared trousers, and I envied him like hell. He strode to the men's clothing salesgirl and said, "Hi." "Oh, hello, Jay," the girl said. "We've got something you'll really like. The newest thing in ties, and so inexpensive. Isn't this one fabulous? And it's just 70. The DJ said in casual approbation, flipping through the ties on the rack. Somehow I couldn't take my eyes off him. He was everything I wanted to be: impressive, polished, well-dressed, popular, and rich. Amma was looking at him too, sorting the ties out, liking one color here, objecting to another's width there, and all the while her eyes were traveling from his hands to the "Please Don't Touch" card, nestling unnoticed among the little heap of sartorial rejects at the bottom of the rack. Suddenly I felt physically sick. I wanted to get out of there, get out of the rarefied, air-conditioned atmosphere, off the wall-to-wall carpeted floor, away from the mirrors on every column that thrust reminders at me of what I really was. A kind of nausea overtook me, and momentarily my head swam, converting the floor, the walls, the mirrors, the designs and patterns and decorations and clothes, into a whirling, twisting question mark, asking me, "What are you doing here?" And suddenly I realized I didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing there, and the question mark straightened itself out in my mind to an arrow, a line, and I knew where the line led, outside, to the relief of the hot pavement and the elegant gloom of the evening shut out by the brocaded, mirrored walls of the Plaza Lounge. "Emma," I said, clutching her sleeve. "Let's go." But she didn't seem to be listening. There was a strange, semi-determined, half-surprised look on her face, and she was moving away from me. I recognized that look. I had often seen it when I had done something wrong at home, and she had turned on me, breathing ingrate. Suddenly, I realized what she was going to do. I tried to stop her, but she had already reached the counter. "Here," she was saying in a loud, shrill voice of complaint. "I thought we weren't supposed to touch the clothes." An offended silence descended upon the congregation. Faces turned to look at us. Emma looked up, a trifle defiantly, expecting an apology or reprimand, but prepared for either, at the salesgirl. The DJ, too, turned from his flirtation with the ties and the women, and gave us the benefit of a mildly offended look. Then he turned back and resumed his conversation with the salesgirl. The hubbub of voices around us resumed. The pause was over. Our clumsy intrusion had largely been forgotten. But in the harder lines of the salesgirl's face I knew it would never be forgiven. "Emma, let's go." She stood still for a moment, incredulity and hurt writ all over her face, and then slowly, resignedly, without a trace of bitterness or resentment, subsided and walked away from the counter. When she spoke, there was a break in her voice. "Yes, son, let's go." Quietly, sadly, we walked to the door. No one noticed our exit. It was as if an insect had been removed from a cup of tea. Something which ought not to have been there in the first place had been ejected. I evaded the eyes of a passing bearer. We used the stairs. When we walked out of the hotel and onto the street, the ambience was oppressive. I wanted to pick up a brick, a stone, a tile from the pavement, anything, and throw it at the glass front of the building. But I didn't. I couldn't. I didn't have the right to. "Let's take a taxi, son," Emma said. "No, Emma," I replied, and suddenly the lump in my throat wasn't that big anymore. "We'll walk to the bus stop as usual." Something in my tone made her turn and look up at me. I smiled. "We're going home, Emma," I said. I felt the pressure of her hand on my arm as we walked slowly on to join the line waiting for the bus. 2. Grammar page.